Today is Friday, May 23rd, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. President Trump responds to the shocking murder of 2 Israeli embassy staffers. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can shoot us an email too if you want to give us a story tip, or you just want to say, hey, Quick Start Podcast at CBN.org. We're glad you're here with us, getting through the news of the cray, as we like to call it, as it often is. Joining me this morning, Tré Goins Phillips. We have a lot to get to, including on the focus story, President Trump taking some action against Harvard.
Yeah, so the Trump administration has terminated Harvard's student visa program. We'll get into what that actually means in a few minutes.
All right, looking forward to the details there coming up in just a minute. On the main thing, concerned citizens have been attending town council meetings more and more. Tré, you talked with one of the most prominent among them.
Yeah, so he's been traveling all around the country. His name is John Amanchukwu, and he has become an outspoken advocate for parents. So we'll get into that fascinating conversation in a bit.
Yeah, even if you don't know his name, you've likely come across a couple of his videos of him at these council meetings, sort of speaking truth into a lot of really, honestly, crazy situations that are going on at some of these schools and these town council meetings and the things that are being allowed right now. So that conversation's coming up on the main thing. You don't want to miss that. All right, make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts, including Billy's Newsmakers. Make sure you just click and subscribe. That we get the link right in the description of this podcast episode. Make it nice and easy. Go ahead and subscribe to that. Also, CBN's Abigail Robertson has Heaven Meets Earth. Fascinating conversations each and every week. You don't want to miss both of those podcasts. And with that, we are going to head to the news in 90 seconds. And President Trump is expressing outrage after 2 Israeli embassy staffers were murdered Wednesday night outside the Capitol Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C. The victims, Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram, were a couple and reportedly preparing to get engaged. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt called the killings a brutal act of anti-Semitic hatred, saying the evil of anti-Semitism must be eradicated from our society. The suspect, 30-year-old Elias Rodriguez of Chicago, is now in custody. Authorities say the Justice Department will prosecute him to the fullest extent of the law. Leavitt said Trump and everyone at the White House are praying for the victims and their families, and reaffirmed hatred has no place in the United States of America under President Donald Trump. And a major legal battle is unfolding in Minnesota over transgender athletes in girls' sports. A Christian legal group, Alliance Defending Freedom, is suing the state on behalf of 3 high school softball players. They claim Minnesota's policy allowing biological males to compete in girls' leagues is both unsafe and unfair, pointing to a trans-identifying pitcher who's dominated games and injured one player. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out those stories and more over at cbnnews.com. Important stories there, Tré. Obviously, the one that captured headlines most of yesterday was this murder of these 2 embassy staffers. And although they were Israeli embassy staffers, they were Messianic Jews. They were believers. They were Christians. And so it just makes the whole thing is sad. Just that anybody would do this to anybody is just sad. But this person said, long live Palestine. So I guess they don't even care who they were shooting at. They just wanted to get anybody that's affiliated with supporting Israel or working for Israel. And it just shows the sad state of affairs here. And as much as there are cries of genocide and all of this on the side, the pro-Palestine side, the pro-Hamas side, it always seems like the violence comes from one direction.
Yeah, I think this whole story is just horrific. They're a young couple. They're, I think, about to get married, and have been victimized and brutally killed as a result of just hatred. Right? I mean, that's all that this is pure hatred. I think one piece of solace, and certainly a huge piece of solace, is the fact that they are messianic believers, right? They're Christians, so we
Yeah.
know that that they're now in heaven, they're in paradise, and that we can grieve unlike the rest of the world, right? Knowing that we have that eternal hope. So I'm grateful for that that comfort in knowing where they are in eternity. But still, my heart breaks for the remaining loved ones who are devastated, I know, from this tragic attack. And I think it just highlights that this anti-Semitism on the far left and far right is just way, way out of control, right? We need to do something to tamp down on it. And I think a lot of the responsibility, people are responsible for their actions, but a lot of the responsibility, at least in the way that this has been handled, falls to the media, right? We've ignored the fact that this is happening because of, we want to be so pro-Palestine, be soft on Hamas, but this is evil and it needs to be called out.
Yeah. And the logic just escapes me to see. I mean, we talked about this in our office chat the other day. Theo Vaughn, this quote unquote comedian who gets bombarded in my algorithm, even though I've never seen a clip of him being funny or even trying to be funny. He's always talking about political things that are going on. And he went on and on and on about how, there's a genocide going on in Gaza right now. And I think I made some comment to someone online, and, the person responded to me, I guess you don't care about the children dying in Gaza. And it's just that level of discourse is so frustrating because it's like, yes, I care. And do you know how those children would still be alive today if Hamas wasn't trying to control Gaza and then attack and destroy Israel all the time? Because they keep doing that. Guess when children aren't dying over there? It's when Hamas isn't attacking anyone, because Israel didn't go on the offensive against them ever. In fact, they gave over Gaza and said, here, have it. We're sick of you. Just take it. We don't want anything to do with it. And what did they do with that? Instead of making a great, thriving nation that they could have all their own, they decided to make a war machine, a really bad one, but a war machine nonetheless. And then they pulled off the horrific October 7th attacks that killed thousand plus Israeli men, women, and children, elderly, young alike. And that was just too much. And Israel had to respond, and they had to just go all out to get Hamas completely eradicated. So, and also you're holding hostages still, by the way, Hamas. If you want this to stop, take it up with Hamas. I don't understand how people don't get this. It's so plainly obvious. And then not to mention, Tré, and we've talked about all this, I'm just venting at this point, but you have the Gazan health ministry just completely fabricating things that the media then parrots. It's, yes, people die in war, but the way they describe it as a genocide is so beyond the pale ridiculous. It's hard to even know where to begin on that claim.
Well, I mean, that's just the lack of intellectual curiosity in our media is certainly not new, right? I mean, they did the same thing in 2020 with COVID. It was everything that China says, anything that the Chinese Communist Party says must be just gospel truth. I'm sure they would never manipulate, like saying that we only lost like 4 people to the COVID pandemic because we were so good at handling it. Like, okay,
it came from a bat. Just don't investigate it any further than that. It was definitely the bats in the wet market there. Don't look any closer to the lab. That's the coronavirus lab there in Wuhan.
Yeah, I think you can just look at any number of issues, whether it's that, the rollout of the vaccine. We're seeing new information about that and myocarditis. And I know that's a whole other completely different topic. But my point is the media has proven itself to not be able to carry 2 things at one time, right? They have to just pick one side and go fully in on it. So if Hamas is, or if Gaza is good, that means Israel is 100% evil. It's like, well, you know what? It's unfortunate and heartbreaking that anybody is dying. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I think it's terrible that there are people in Gaza who are dying, who are innocent people. I think also that they elected a terrorist organization to lead them. And a terrorist organization is now doing what terrorists do.
Right.
And they ought to be held accountable for it.
It seems like common sense, Tré, but apparently we're having a shortage of that around the globe today. So let's pray for
years we've had the shortage.
For years. Let's pray for some common sense to be restored around the globe, people looking at these issues and not just caving to bumper sticker sounding type slogans. So, all right, well, we are going to head to the focus story now. And as we mentioned there at the top of the podcast, Trump administration taking some action against Harvard University regarding international students. So what's going on here?
So the Trump administration has revoked, as of yesterday, Harvard University's certification to enroll international students under the Student and Exchange Visitor Program, which is a federally regulated organization or initiative, So this decision effectively blocks Harvard from admitting new international students and will require current international students to transfer to other institutions or risk losing their legal status to remain here in the United States starting in the fall.
So what reasons did the administration provide for sort of taking this, I don't want to call it drastic, but for taking this measure?
So, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem cited concerns over Harvard's alleged failure to address anti-Semitism on campus, tolerance of pro-Hamas ideology, speaking about this issue, and the presence of foreign students involved in illegal and even violent activities. The Trump administration, that is, argued that Harvard's environment has posed national security risks, not only to the students there on campus, specifically Jewish students, but also just to the country as a whole. And said that the university is, quote, unfit to be entrusted with taxpayer dollars. And we've talked about this a lot, Dan. All of this comes after a spate of anti-Semitic incidents, not only on Harvard's campus, but on other college campuses, specifically Ivy League campuses, but definitely at Harvard. 6 Jewish students filed a lawsuit against the university in January of 2024. They claimed then that Harvard administrators failed to address, quote, severe and pervasive anti-Semitism on campus. And the Trump administration just believes that Harvard has not done enough to actually address these issues at all. So they're saying, you know what, if you're not going to address the anti-Semitic attacks, you're not going to get this government funding and you can't participate in this initiative.
And how's Harvard responded to this decision from the administration?
Well, as you can imagine, Harvard has not been too thrilled. They've condemned the move as unlawful and retaliatory. They're actively supporting these students that are affected by this decision. They've initiated legal action against the Trump administration, and they're arguing that Trump's actions threaten academic independence and believe that it's all part of a broader politically motivated attack to punish Harvard.
That's very interesting, especially you have to think these universities are just not used to, even when a Republican administration, even the first Trump administration, you had a lot of status quo type things going on now. And that is one thing that is definitely not the same in the second Trump administration is the status quo is no longer a thing. So you could not get away. You used to be able to get away with things like this at a university and not even worry about the government coming down and maybe taking a closer look at some of the funding that they're getting. It was just kind of like a free gravy train. Well, right. The Trump administration definitely feels a lot different on this front, and they are just not taking a lot of the nonsense. They're taking actions when they see these things instead of just throwing a few lines out there of support for people on the right or for Jewish people or for anyone who supports Israel. Instead of just throwing that verbal support out there, they're really like seeming like they are, okay, what are we going to be able to do to really discourage these sorts of actions?
Yeah, I think with this issue and any number of other issues that the Trump administration has tackled, you can see that, one, Trump is coming in smarter than he was the first time, right? He knows people in D.C. He knows who he wants and who he doesn't want in his administration, who he wants crafting policy and who he doesn't. And also, he's not bound by a re-election, right? He's done running. So it's like, I can do what I have wanted to do, in my first term. Now I'm wiser, and also I don't have to, I'm not beholden to lobbyists and all these people who are going to say, well, you need to run for re-election in 4 years. This is about making a legacy, and I think he's really sticking it to a lot of the status quo that you said that people have just assumed, especially Ivy League and higher education. They've just assumed we can do whatever we want to. The government's not going to take away our funding. We can jack up the prices as much as we want. We can indoctrinate as much as we want. Nobody's going to touch us because we're untouchable. I think that this is proving with Kristi Noem's action that actually you're not quite as untouchable as maybe you thought you were.
Yep. Seems like whether you like it or on that side or you don't, there's definitely a new sheriff in town and things are
Yeah.
not going as business as usual here. So appreciate you bringing the details on this one. Tré, you got any final thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, look, I think this is a critical issue, not just with higher education, but the anti-Semitism issue
Yeah.
is what really matters. And the fact that people on the left are so just willing to dismiss, like, oh, the actions that the Trump administration is taking is purely politically motivated. It's like, well, actually, there's a lot of anti-Semitism happening, and isn't that something that you should care about? And
Yes.
you say you care about it. Trump is actually putting his money where his mouth is. He's taking action to address the anti-Semitic attacks happening on campuses. To me, this should be an easy win, right? It should be a bipartisan thing,
right? But of course, then you get partisan politics always find a way to creep in on it. But hopefully these actions can lead in one way or another to less anti-Semitism on campus, because that has certainly been a problem. And like I said, thanks for bringing that one to our attention on the podcast today, Tré. And we're going to head over to the main thing now. And Pastor John Amanchukwu joined Tré to talk about the battles he's fought with school boards across the country. You've probably seen, even if you don't know the name, like I said, you've definitely seen some clips of him confronting a lot of these officials, and many of them have gone viral. Well, this conversation is today's main thing.
You were very recently shut down during a speech at a school board meeting. This is something that you have spent now years doing, going and speaking out against the sexualized content that kids are often exposed to in many public schools across the country. This interaction happened at the Glens Falls school board meeting in New York. Tell us what happened there.
So I went to that school board meeting to address a number of issues. Number one, they defrauded an organization called TPUSA from having a school sponsored club on campus. They wouldn't give them space and they kicked those students off. And so that's one issue, but also the number of pornographic books that's in the school district is astounding. There's several books in their district, books like Genderqueer, which I read from, and Beyond Magenta, All Boys Aren't Blue, The Bluest Eye, The Kite Runner, and The Hate You Give. And these are all tragically pornographic books. And so I went and read from the book Genderqueer, and the school board got angry. I mean, the board chairman said, "You can't say that here because that's inappropriate." And I'm thinking to myself, that's the point. If it's inappropriate for me to read from it in a school board meeting, why are we giving access to kids for this kind of content? That's really the argument that I seek to make as I travel this country. And oftentimes the school board leaders don't want to hear it read aloud, but they'll make sure that kids can have access to it.
So, John, tell us a little bit about what you make of that irony, the fact that they want these books, they want this content to be made available and maybe even to be ingrained into curricula for students around the country. But then when they're confronted with it in a school board meeting, it's too inappropriate. It's maybe too controversial to be said out loud publicly. Why do you think there's that disconnect there? That seems, it's a funny irony, right?
Sure. I released a documentary entitled 22 Words. You can go to 22wordsfilm.com to take a look at it. And it details my national school board campaign, and it shows you how we ended up in this mess that we're in today. In 1962, you had the Engle v. Vitale court case, and this is the court case that led to school-sponsored prayer being removed. There was a simple, non-denominational, non-proselytizing prayer that was in the school system at the time in Hyde Park, New York. And the prayer is simple. It says, "Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon thee, and we beg thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country." And that prayer had 22 words in it, hence the name of the film, 22 Words. And former Secretary of Education William Bennett in his cultural indexes reported that from the 1960s all the way to the 1990s, that teenage pregnancy skyrocketed, violent crimes went up, Test scores plummeted all across the board. Everything that you wanted to take place that was positive, it was all reversed. Everything went down. It was a downward spiral for the American education system. And so we've gone from prayer to now porn in the public school system. We've gone from prayer to transgenderism, from prayer to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in the name of DEI, there are many librarians and school board leaders and teachers who think that children must see themselves reflected on a bookshelf. So that is the irony. We are dealing with the sacred cow of DEI, and we must get rid of it.
So obviously, this is an all-important issue. It's one that so many parents across the country are grappling with. It's not an abstract issue. This is an issue that is real and genuinely and authentically impacting people's lives. And before we get too much further in the conversation, John, tell us a little bit about your background. Why is this something you're passionate about, and where did your faith journey begin?
Well, 3 years ago, I was notified of a situation that took place in Chatham County, which is about 45 minutes from me. There was a young Christian girl at school who was, living up to the creed of her faith. And she expressed that in the classroom while dealing with an assignment. And her teacher told her that believing in Jesus was tantamount to believing in a brick wall. And so when I was told that by a person who was working with Moms for Liberty, I knew that I had to do something to go and speak up for her and to defend her honor. I went and spoke at that school board meeting and didn't know what would take place. I became steeped in many of the issues like critical race theory and the plan to redefine proficiency and all of that stuff, and racial consciousness, all of the woke ideologies, And after speaking at the school board meeting, the message that I delivered went viral, landing me on hundreds of podcasts and shows across the board. And then immediately I was inundated with requests to go to school board meetings all around the country. So I've now traveled to 19 states, speaking up and defending children, fighting against gender theory, queer theory, critical race theory, and DEI. I've been able to flip a few school boards. We've been able to strike down a transgender policy, namely Policy 5756 in New Jersey. I've been able to remove hundreds of pornographic books from bookshelves around the country. And we're now training moms and dads and grandparents how to reclaim schools and communities. I have a master class that I'm releasing in about 4 weeks, where you'll be able to go to my website, iknowgod.us. It's iknowgod.us, and find out more information about that. But I recorded 23 sessions on how to discern and know when woke ideologies are being taught. It also trains parents and individuals on how to run for school board positions and or coalesce and build a network. And it trains you even on how to work towards flipping your school board and voting out your more staunch leftist school board members.
Yeah, great conversation there. You can check out the full conversation, by the way. That was just a portion of it. You watch Faith and Culture this Saturday at 3:30 Eastern on the CBN News YouTube channel and Facebook page. Make sure you check out that full conversation there. Tré, the thing that always blows my mind with these people that go in, like the pastor there going in and talking to these town council meetings, is when they do what he said. Hey, you can't read that here. That's too disgusting and inappropriate. It's like, talk about a cell phone. You're making his point.
Yeah. He said he has been surprised at the number of school districts who don't recognize that irony, but also the number of parents who are like not actually aware that this stuff is actually pretty widespread and pretty available. So yeah, he said, I'm going to keep doing it, but the irony is certainly not lost on him.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, make sure you're checking out that whole conversation there on Faith and Culture. All right. That's going to leave us with time on the pod today for one last thing.
The wicked flee when no one pursues, but the righteous are bold as a lion. I think it's a great reminder for really all the stories we talked about today on the podcast.
Proverbs 28:1 there. That's a great one to end our week on. And let's be bold as lions in the word of God and the word of truth. All right, make sure you get on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. And Lord willing, that creek don't rise up on us. We'll be back with Tuesday with more. We got a holiday weekend. God bless. Enjoy it, everybody.